The following is a GoPowercat.com production.
Baylor Bears, one of the old Southwest Conference teams. They started off maybe struggling a little bit in the Big 12, but over the last decade, they have really made a name for themselves in both football and basketball. Today, we've got Foster Nicholas talking Baylor. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hello, everybody. This is Brien Hanley, and welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Appreciate everybody joining us. Today, we've got Foster Nicholas joining us, talking Baylor. He covers Baylor for 24/7. 24/7 Sports. We appreciate you being here, Foster. How you doing today?
Absolutely, doing good. I mean, best time of the year, right? I mean, basketball all day long.
Absolutely. So we appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today. So let's just get started. First off, let me cover some bases here, everybody. As always, remember to like, follow, subscribe. More importantly, comment and hit the notification bell. The channel is growing. We appreciate everybody. So thank you guys for joining us today. So, Foster, let's start off with the basketball squad. Men's basketball playing very well. I mean, the Big 12 Conference, as we all know, is the best conference in the country. Baylor finished third in the conference, played well. Looking from the outside looking in, people are going to look, man, they don't have that one real dominant scorer. But they've got 6 guys that are averaging in double figures. Not something that you see very often in college basketball, especially in this day and age.
Right. And I think the storyline going into this year is you've got one starter returning. So that was a question mark. It was going to be from the beginning of the year. And I think a lot of the expectations were on freshman Jacoby Walter to be that guy and lead this team. And in fact, this is not a team led by freshmen. You've got Ray J. Dennis, who's the team leader, the ball handler, and Jalen Bridges has really stepped up. And I think that's a benefit of the team when you're bringing in these 5-star guys who are going to be one and done prospects. I think Yves Missi, he was not going to be one and done at the beginning of this year. He steps on the court and he does what he does. And I think you're shocked by that. And then, also a little bit heartbroken because you only get to see that for 1 year. But when you've got that veteran leadership and a squad, I think head coach Scott Drew's done an amazing job of just working with what he's got. And that's what they've had to do this year. And I think 6 scorers, Baylor, one of only 2 teams in the nation to do that with over 10 points.
Yeah. I mean, really, really balanced scoring. And the way they were able to navigate through the Big 12, and again, not having such a dominant score, but being a really, really balanced team, but scoring a lot of points. See, a lot of times, Foster, teams that are balanced like that, they're not averaging 81 points a game, and Baylor's a team that can put the ball in the basket. Got to tell everybody, a little bit about, some of the strengths and weaknesses, maybe that a lot of Big 12 fans, well, you see Baylor from time to time, but maybe we don't know the ins and outs of all of that.
Well, nearing the end of Big 12 play, Baylor was the only team that had not either won or lost a game in conference play by double digits. So it was not just shootouts, but it was tight shootouts every single night. And you were down to the wire wondering what's going to happen. And I think that's a strength of this team actually moving forward is they've been there, done that through Big 12 play. There haven't been those 30-point blowouts that other Big 12 teams have seen. In fact, their only double-digit loss in conference play came at the end of it against Texas Tech. So I think just playing teams tight, and the strength is going to be shooting from 3-point range. And this is a team that should not turn the ball over too many times. It happened against Kansas. It happened later in conference play against TCU as well. But I think this is a team that is very strong offensively. And once they have their defensive mentality up, they can match just about anything. They should be able to out-rebound teams. They should be able to outshoot from 3-point range, but they're not going to force anything. And I think that's also a big strength of this Baylor team, but they can be taken advantage of on defense. I think you've got to be locked in 100%. You saw that against Texas Tech, obviously a 16-0 run to start that game. And then you even it up and then you allow 4 straight 3-pointers. So it's just keeping that energy up. And if that energy is high all game long, the Bears are definitely a tough team to take down.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I see with Baylor. I mean, they shoot almost 40% from 3. So they shoot the ball very well. Defense, kind of what you mentioned, it can be their Achilles heel. Having said that, going into, let's talk about the Big 12 tournament first. I see their path to winning this thing, beating Iowa State, obviously, in Houston, because I think First off, I think Cincinnati beats Kansas tonight. Kansas, if they haven't mailed it in, I mean, Bill Self all but said they were mailing it in, not even attempting to play his two best players. Although they're hurt, I think they could probably play if they needed to, but they're not going to. So I think, and I think Baylor advances. They beat Cincinnati and then going against Iowa State. The chances, or should I say, are Baylor fans actually wanting to win this tournament? We've asked a couple people this question. Are they wanting to win the Big 12 tournament and so hell-bent on winning it? Or are they, you know what, let's play well. As long as we play well, even if we lose, let's get ready for the NCAA tournament.
Sure. I mean, the emphasis is always going to be on the NCAA tournament.
Sure.
But the Big 12 tournament is the only thing that Scott Drew doesn't have a championship in. I mean, he's won the national championship. He's won that regular season crown a couple of times, but the Bears haven't made that championship game since 2014. So this is obviously something the team wants a whole lot. And maybe the fan base is fine. I mean, you definitely aren't losing that first game. That would be a big disappointment. I mean,
correct.
At least, and that probably could drop the Bears down a seed potentially in NCAA tournament time. But I think you do want to win this tournament. And I mean, Baylor fans would love to smack down on Kansas and pull for that upset today and then
sure,
do whatever you got to do tomorrow. But I mean, I don't know how you do that. Last year in the NCAA tournament, you did face Iowa State, and Jalen Bridges was 7 for 7 from 3 to open that ball game. And you'd need something similar to take down Iowa State, especially at a neutral site that's nearly a home game for the Cyclones.
Absolutely.
And then Houston's just a tough squad. But Jacoby Walter, in talking to the media a couple of days ago, he said, like, as a freshman, these guys were playing travel ball and maybe they'd have all 3 of these games in the same day. So it's not really going to be a big wear and tear moment for them. I think a lot of the narrative is 3 games in 3 days against 3 tough teams. How do you do that? And I think that's honestly what you need to prepare for the NCAA tournament. And even if you don't take down a Houston team, maybe third time's the charm if you get to the NCAA tournament and face them again.
Got it. Well, the one thing, and I think you stated it very well, Foster, is talking about the 3 games in 3 days, is somebody's going to do that. Yeah. So it's not like somebody isn't going to have accomplished it. Somebody even might win 4. Now, I think it's going to be very difficult to win 4, especially in this conference, 4 games in 4 days. I don't know, but somebody has to win 3 games in 3 days to win this tournament. So why not Baylor? I think that would be a thought in my head. Moving on to the NCAA tournament, the seeding is going to be where it is. We've seen it everywhere. At least I've seen it anywhere from a 4 seed to a 6 seed. I think 6 is a little high for Baylor. I think somewhere in the 3 to 5 range is where I would slot them in. Any thoughts as far as going into the tournament? Any nerves, or is it good to have an experience? I think it's always good to have an experienced coach that can kind of navigate some of these guys that maybe didn't play a ton last year, especially since only 1 returning starter. But when you have a national championship coach coming back, that kind of eases some of those fears.
Sure. And the Bears also have 1 player on their roster who was on that national championship team, and Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua, who's kind of just worked into almost a coach role as a 5th-year senior and kind of talked to the guys. So they do feel like they're prepared. And I think the nerves are down. They're going to treat the Big 12 tournament like the NCAA tournament and just kind of get into that groove, prepare the way they will when it comes later in March. But I don't generally think there's too many nerves. I think this is a moment that the freshmen, especially, I think Yves Missi and Jacoby Walter are some of the most mature guys off the court that you'll see in the nation as a freshman. So I think nerves really aren't an issue at this point. It's going to be a 3-4 seed. I mean, if you win the Big 12 tournament, you're a lock for a 2. But I think that's pushing it at this point. And I think the goal is obviously to get to the Sweet 16, which the Bears haven't done in the past 2 years after winning that national championship.
Right. And that was going to be my thing, is just getting back to the Sweet 16. And I think a lot of times in the NCAA tournament, it's the first 2 rounds that'll come up and bite you sometimes. And it's almost like you got to get the guys got to get you there. And then you get the coaching aspect comes in a little bit more to get you back to the Final 4. I've heard a lot of coaches mention that, is that, hey, I need you guys to get through the first 2 rounds, because a lot of times you're, especially with Baylor, you're going to be a favorite. An underdog gets hot. They get on a roll. They get confidence, all that kind of stuff. And you just need your guys to just step up. And sometimes it's, you're putting your foot down on their neck early, take all the confidence out of it and going that route. Having said that, Baylor hasn't had any of those games where they've just blown out, especially, well, at least in the conference. So lately, just blowing somebody out. is is that a concern going in, or is it more of a, you know what, we're battle tested, we're ready for what the NCAA is going to bring us?
I mean, I think in the first round you expect a blowout, and whether
Sure.
that happens or not, we'll see. I don't think it's a concern necessarily because they have played so many tight games and found a way to win. I mean, they've been crushed by just about every single buzzer beater in their new arena. I mean,
Right.
Foster Pavilion has been the site of 3 buzzer beaters, whether that be half court shots or 3-pointers from the visiting team. So they understand the moment, and I think obviously you'd love to put your foot on the gas, but I think week 1, or rather game 1 of that NCAA tournament, is going to be finding your depth and finding your rotations again. Langston Love
Gotcha.
was obviously out the last 8 of 9, returned against Texas Tech, and him and Jaden Nunn are really battling for that, 5th spot on the floor as you move down the stretch. Love was the closer, and then Jaden Nunn exploded for multiple 20-point games, and now you're trying to figure out the best rotation of the guys. So I think in game 1, it's not going to be focus on winning by 20 and just get there, but instead find comfortability and who's going to play in what role as you move forward.
Absolutely. One quick question again before we take a quick break here, and I'm not doing my job if I don't ask. Louisville job popped open today. Scott Drew's name has popped in a lot of Louisville fans' mind, and Scott Drew's coming. I'm one of the people that don't think that Scott Drew would even dream of taking that job, especially as long in the roots that he has established at Baylor. Any worry from Baylor fans at all that Scott Drew would step away to take the Louisville job?
No, I think it's really silly, and I think it's silly that it continues to evolve. I think that what Scott Drew has valued most is creating his culture and religion and the things that he wants to do at Baylor. He would not be able to do that at another top program, and the Bears are one of only 2 teams, the other being Kansas, to have an elevated level of success the past 5 years. It just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
No.
He's got added resources, a brand new home court for him. I mean, it doesn't make sense, and even tossing in Jerome Tang's name or anything, I just don't see it going that way. And honestly, I would be happy if one of the Baylor assistant coaches who are well deserving of a job could do a job almost as good as Scott Drew if they went there. But no, I'm not going to say it's a 0% chance. They should obviously ask if Scott Drew's interested, but I assume it's a quick no.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm from Louisville. I'm a diehard Louisville fan. I have been my entire life. And people keep asking me, and I said, Scott Drew is not coming to Louisville. There is no way, no how. I will say 0%. I have no qualms with saying it's a 0% chance. You don't build what you build, what he's been able to build there to go to Louisville. And I'm not saying Louisville's not a good job. I'm not saying that, but what he's been able to build and do and the success, why do you leave that? I could see if he was there maybe 5, 6, 7 years. Okay, yeah. But 19? I mean, that's crazy talk.
I mean, find another Hall of Fame head coach also who would go and accept that job at this point. It just doesn't make sense for anyone at this point.
No, not at this point. You're absolutely right. So we're going to park a break right here. We'll be back on the other side of the break. We'll talk a little bit of Baylor football, some of the spring expectations and some of the schedule, what's going on, what's happening, and what are some of the expectations going into next season. But we'll hear a quick word from our sponsor at Synergy Financial Partners.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Brien Hanley. Appreciate everybody being here with us. We got Foster Nicholas again, covering Baylor with 24/7 Sports. So, Foster, let's flip the script here. Let's talk a little bit of football. So, Baylor's season last year didn't go the way that a lot of Baylor fans thought. There's been some rumblings out there about Dave Aranda, him being there, people wanting him out. What is the spring look like? Is there a lot of let's just say a lot of competition for jobs after the way that the season went last year? Or is it more of, you know what, we're learning, we're building fundamentals? What is the approach that Baylor's taking with spring football this year?
I think it really should be along the line of competing and figuring out who's going to be that guy. But then again, I feel like that swings into what we heard preseason last year in the spring was this team's going to be so good. We're going to be better than that 6-7 record we
Right.
eclipsed in 2022 and then just fell flat. And I think that was
Right.
the mentality. They thought they were so good and just the competition, and it didn't work out. And I will say Dave Aranda is one of the best defensive minds in college football. No doubt about it. But I think the way he's attacked this maybe hasn't been correct. And he's finally attacking the transfer portal, getting in a bunch of top tier freshmen, maybe not the 5 stars you'd like to see, but he's building this program in the right way. And I expect there to be a lot more development in this offseason than the one prior.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, and I've been asking a lot of different people, that question is what avenue you're taking. And I was interested to see what you would say about that, because like you said, it wasn't just the inside of Baylor thought was going to be really good. I think a lot of people on the outside thought that Baylor was going to be really good. And then things just kind of fell apart. So what was the reason? Was there anything specific that you can put your finger on why it fell apart?
I think the team just, I won't say they weren't ready, but I don't think they were just mentally there enough to go out there week one. And this was a team, like you had said, they were receiving votes in the first poll. They were nearly a ranked team entering the season, and then it just fell flat week one. And I don't know how they didn't recover from that week one loss. And I think, you battle through injuries, but everyone does. Lost your starting quarterback for a while, and then there just wasn't any chemistry. I mean, this was a team that put together the worst offense in the Big 12. You couldn't get the ground game going. Richard Reese, freshman of the year, was a guy who barely touched the ball. His most impactful game actually came with 2 kick return touchdowns at the end of the season. And there was just no offensive identity. You couldn't pass block, couldn't run block. And then the defensive side of the ball, a good defense. But if the opponent's got the ball for 40 minutes, at some point you just can't do enough. So I think it was just a lot of things piling one on top of the other. And I don't think that, miracle in the Magic Kingdom against UCF helped any. I think that was actually something that pushed against this team, as they thought they were finally pushing over the hump and they just couldn't continue that momentum.
Right. So looking into the spring, any specific position battles that Baylor fans need to be taking a look at, keeping an eye on, that maybe either they think is going to be a position that a position battle that they need to watch, or maybe not, but any position battles out there in the spring that Baylor fans need to look at?
I think right now the strength of this team is going to be the safeties, the cornerbacks. I think this is a really strong group. You've got a bunch of freshmen who are returning, and while there isn't a lot of competition there, it's seeing their development and where they go. And then the competition's on the outside, on the other side of the field, which would be the wide receivers, the tight ends. You're losing a little bit of depth, and with a new offensive system, I think you look for Monterey Baldwin and Josh Cameron, who was a guy who was really big in last year's offense. He just doesn't really fit in this wide zone scheme, or rather not the wide zone, just attacking it all over. He doesn't fit in that. So I think looking for what wide receivers are able to step up and push outside, move to the slot, I think will be interesting to look at. And then obviously you look at the running back room. You've got Dominic Richardson, Dawson Pendergrass, and Richard Reese. On paper, the best running back trio in the Big 12.
Right.
But no one's really there to take the majority of the carries. So you'd hope one of them establishes themselves as the clear number one guy, so you're not stuck with a first down back, a second down back, and a third down back, because that did not work last year at all.
Right. And it's not, obviously the running back position is not like quarterback. They always say, well, if you've got 2, you've got none. You need a couple of guys, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's like you said, you need somebody to take the lead and be that guy. So again, you're not constantly having to shift around because you don't have somebody to actually take the lead and be the lead dog there. So looking at their schedule coming up, and we were talking off air about this, is that they are one of the, and there's a couple other in the Big 12 that are actually playing Big 12 opponents, but it's going to be considered a non-conference game. They play against Utah, second game of the year, very tough. I'm taking a look at Baylor's schedule. Anything that we're looking at, the Big 12, to me, I think is going to be a very competitive conference. Are fans looking forward to the schedule and expecting high hopes, or has things kind of been tapered after what's happened the last 2 years?
Well, the schedule's not doing them any favors. I'll be honest. This is one of the toughest schedules in the Big 12, and you're going to have to figure it out quick. I think I like having Utah early in the season. I think that'll test you to where you're at before you travel to Colorado and take on that team for the first time in the Big 12, which looks much improved. But the expectation is a winning season. You need to have a winning season if Dave Aranda wants to stick around. And I'm actually a guy who, if they go 6-6, I'd expect him to stay as well. I do like the trajectory of this program. I think he's fixed his mentality this year. And I think if that shows a little bit of progression, the Bears probably stick with him one more year before moving on. But I don't see it. I mean, I'm seeing 5-7.
Yeah.
And I think you're right on the edge of a bowl game, depending on who steps up. I mean, you talk about a team last year with the most freshmen in the Big 12. So they better, they got their experience. They were sophomores at the end of last year. So they better act like upperclassmen heading into this year if Baylor wants to have success.
Yeah, I look at the schedule again a second time. I'm like, oh man, it's going to be a little difficult to navigate. However, if the improvement that a lot of Baylor fans are expecting, or we think that is going to happen, again, I don't think 6-6 is out of the question at all. Like you mentioned before, Dave Aranda, outstanding defensive mind. It just from the outside looking in, I love what Baylor has done. Yes, they've had a couple of down years, but at the same time, I just like what Baylor has done. Ever since Matt Rule took over, built it up, Dave Aranda comes in, doesn't have the great first year, and then all of a sudden, boom, there you are. So I love what Baylor is doing. Great university, great that it's part of the Big 12. One last question about that. With all this expansion talk and all that stuff, what is kind of Baylor fans – because I think more expansion is coming as far as the Big 12 is concerned. Sure. Are Baylor fans, are they excited one way or another? If they are, do they want them to go west? Do they want them to go east? Any talk as far as what Baylor fans are either expecting or wanting with expansion?
I do think it's coming, but I think the mentality is don't leave us out. I think Baylor has proved themselves as a great basketball school and a football school that's had some success, but Baylor is primarily a basketball school. And with that program, I think the feeling is maybe they get left out because they're not a football powerhouse quite yet. And they don't push into one of those two major conferences. So at this point, it's sticking with the Big 12 and trying to find as much success on, just about every sport that you can to make sure that you fit your way. I think probably West would be ideal, but I wouldn't rule out an East Coast transition.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's an interesting take. And you're right. I think a lot of schools in the Big 12, not just Baylor, are kind of on the cusp of, hey, just don't leave us out. Mm-hmm. We're sticking with the Big 12. We like what the Big 12 is doing. And hopefully Big 12 pushes forth this basketball TV rights deal that if they can get a basketball contract, Baylor obviously would be right in the middle of getting that done because of how good they've been. So, well, thank you, Foster. We appreciate you taking the time and being with us today. And talking a little Baylor athletics. We will have you back as many times as you can come back and have time. So we appreciate you, my guy.
Absolutely. It was fun.
All right. We will be back. We'll take one final word from our sponsor, and we'll end the show after that. We'll be right back once you hear from Synergy Financial Group.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
So, let me fix that. I apologize. Well, the Baylor Bears, look, the athletic department is doing outstanding. Look, I know football has maybe the last couple of years hasn't been what a lot of people may think they are or should have been, but Baylor football will be back if it's not back this year. I think they've got things going in the right direction. If Dave Aranda is the coach that I think we all think that he is, I think they'll be back. And football, it is what it is. They'll be back. As far as basketball is concerned, look, Scott Drew is, in my opinion, one of the top 5 coaches in the country. Look, don't listen to those crazy rumors about him going to Louisville. That's not going to happen. He's retiring as a Baylor basketball coach, in my opinion. And as far as them moving into the Big 12 tournament, maybe they win it, maybe they don't. Again, you guys know me. I'm not sure it's that important that teams go and do this. But at the same time, I think Baylor is one of those teams that nobody's really talking about getting into a Final Four. I think they can be one of those teams that get themselves to a Final Four. So we appreciate everybody joining us on the Big 12 Insiders. We'll be back tomorrow to see if we can do it better. See you later.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.